On this episode, my father-in-law comes on to hawk his book. You ask questions, and I answer them. This is the Ask Gary V Show. Hey everybody, this is Gary Vaynerchuk, and this is episode 153 of the Ask Gary V Show. As you can see, in a rare situation. By the way, we're doing a double header today. We're doing a double header today, Peter. I'll introduce Peter in a second. We're doing a double header today, so that's the first time we've ever done that. So I like the fact that D-Rock and Stefan are both gonna actually have to work India. That's good for a change, right? And we'll be editing it up, and I'm excited. Are you guys good? I guess we can release them very similar at the same time. I'm excited about that. But Peter, why don't you tell the Vayner Nation who you are?
Hello, everybody. This is Peter Klein, and yes, I really am Gary Vaynerchuk's father-in-law.
It's true.
In this episode, I'm glad to say we're going to reverse the roles a bit, and we're going to reverse Gary into moving from Mr. Answer Man to Mr. Question Man.
Okay.
But before that...
Do you know this, India? No. Okay, good. Here we go.
We got to be flexible in our business.
Yep.
And before we ask Gary to maybe ask a couple questions of why I'm really here sitting in on this version, I want to ask Gary maybe a bit of an introspective question, building on a question asked by Mark Cuban in episode 151 and a half.
Yes.
I might be accurate or not.
150 and a half?
When he wanted to know, and I think he basically asked Gary, when you interview talent, you know, what are a few of the key questions you ask in almost every interview?
Yes.
So my question to you, Gary, is really three parts. The first two pretty fast. But in your history, from a kid on through today, was there ever an individual, guy or gal, who you think intensely disliked you? Yes or no?
That knew me?
Yes, sir. And I would use the word almost hate, but I'd go short of that. Intensely, or you think disliked you?
That knew me for more than a second, or just came across me?
Don't try.
Well, the answer is a ton of people.
Okay.
Okay.
Second part of it is, give me the name of one of them. Just first name alone. Just first name.
Oded.
Oded?
Oded.
Oded?
O-D-E-D. Oded.
Oded. Oded.
Oded.
Gary's not here.
Okay.
What do you dislike with Gary?
Oh, Peter, here's the thing. So we're in second grade, and Gary's very popular, and everybody likes him, and that bothers me, so I'm not going to invite him to his birthday party, and to my birthday party, because I'm Oded, because I'm jealous of his enormous charisma.
Okay. Well, my follow-up to that was basically going to be that you scored fine on that question on passion and transparency.
Yes.
I'm not quite sure on the transparency side.
Well, I think that's the truth.
But if that's the truth, then introspective-wise, that's fine.
Peter, hold on. I'm going to jump in here. Guys, I adore my father-in-law. Let me tell you a fun fact. Peter, why don't you, actually, I'm going to play a little bit here as host. Here's a little fun fact. This is going to blow a lot of people's minds away. What, you know, you were a tremendously successful marketer, and you once were involved in the naming rights of a football stadium when you were an executive. True?
True.
Why don't you tell the Vayner Nation what stadium that was?
Gillette Stadium, New England Patriots. A couple of us went there in very early '01.
Can you believe this? Sorry.
So we still made I still made the cut to get on the Ask Gary V show, and the headline was, "We didn't even know there was a stadium being built at the time." We were working on a turnaround at the Gillette company, and maybe a year into the turnaround, the Kraft family approached us. Actually, a software company, CMGI, I think may have gone from $100, $180 a share down to $5 or $10. They had bought the rights to the new stadium. And before the stadium opened, they wanted out. So to make a long story short, we were able to get the naming rights to Gillette Stadium.
So Vayner Nation, you probably will find this super fascinating. Peter, you know, when I met Peter's lovely daughter, Lizzie, I was very much in the wine business. Peter was actively one of the top executives at Gillette. Peter, didn't you guys didn't the deal of selling Gillette fall through on the night of our wedding? Isn't there some funny story like that?
That's right. It originally...
Is that why you missed the whole wedding? Was that?
No, that was public domain.
Okay, good.
No, it was, they decided to decide to walk for a few reasons, and then they revisited it about 4 or 6 weeks later. That was the best day of your life, right? When you knew that your daughter was marrying such a top class human being. That must have been a big night for you. Well, that was a big night, but the bigger night was after when we finally got to know you, before the big night.
Which was when?
Just without giving too much away here, I kind of knew Gary was a wine expert when on the very first time we ever met was at a dinner here in Manhattan. And I came in with a bottle of wine in a brown paper bag, and halfway through the meal, when Mr. Wine expert, you know, basically told me he knew every wine in the world, I said, well, you know, tell me who made this one, and I pulled out a bottle that on the front label said Major League Baseball, you know, special edition kind of thing, and without even turning around the bottle, Gary nailed who made it and where it was made.
Thanks,
and
PK.
then finally, the second meeting was when I drove up to my home to have dinner.
Yes.
And knew Gary was going to be there for dinner with my daughter. And as I drive up to the house, I'm driving up and I see the identical car I'm driving. Color, type, etc.
So weird.
And I was convinced when I walked inside that Gary rented that car to try to make
a good impression.
It was his actual car.
Listen.
But anyway, thanks for the time today.
As you can imagine, what an unbelievable, you know, when you get to marry someone, you're marrying their family as well, and I couldn't have gotten luckier with Lizzie and her family, Peter being at the forefront of that. Obviously, as my career took a different change and got into this corporate marketing world, this is literally, you know, you gotta look it up. I mean, the guy's got a book. I mean, I don't know if it's selling as many copies as the books that I tend to sell, Peter. You know, I tend to be a little bit competitive with this stuff.
Yeah, I didn't notice, but what's kind of interesting, this is a book that 3 of us wrote. It came out in June from McGraw-Hill, and we did it for a variety of reasons. I'll just briefly tell you what it's about. But no, we didn't sell 60 or 70,000 pre-sale, although it came out in mid-June, and we were told that it's in its second printing, kicked in early September.
Nice job.
Now, we don't know if they printed 9 copies in the first round or how many copies, but so be it. It's in its second round.
Listen, I think, so Indy, you have questions. Peter, you don't have questions, do you? What are you doing here? By the way, this is what's so amazing about you and I. Like, you look at Peter. You literally laid out what you were going to say. This is where we differ quite a bit.
This is a difference.
This is a difference between the two of us.
The discipline of the old, or call it the older generation.
Classic. Use classic. Use classic.
Protects himself and prepares in advance versus the 118% left brain driven younger generation.
Peter, I'm pretty old compared to the people that are watching, just so you know.
That's probably true.
Yeah, look at these youngsters. How old are you, Stefan?
I'm looking around.
Stefan's 24. India? 25. India's 25. D-Rock?
24.
Look at this.
And not too distant future, you might move out of the millennial definition.
I'm not in it right now.
That's right. Okay.
It sucks. Anyway, are you asking? Did you literally bring questions, or can we get into we can get into the show?
No, we can get.
We'll talk a little more about the book because I'm here to make sure the Vayner Nation buys 58 million copies of it. But India, let's get into the show. You ready, PK? We're both gonna answer. We're both gonna answer here.
Good.
All right.
Ready.
I mean, we'll play around. Let's see what happens here. I mean, we spent a billion minutes. What's that? Oh, you did. India is very, you know, she's sharp. She's a creator. Left brain 118%. All right, go ahead.
Kyle asks, as someone who's about to turn 30 myself, what was the most important thing you did in your 30s to change your future?
PK, why don't you take that? He's about to turn 30.
It's a great question. And the answer is I took a deep breath, stepped back, and I said to myself, where did I kind of want to be in the next 10 to 20 years from then? I actually was working at Gillette. I worked there twice. And this was 72 to 78. And I took a step back and I said, you know, I wanted to be in a position between the ages of 32 to 35 where I could make a decision, do I kind of stay corporate America and on a fast track and doing all those things, etc., or shift gears and go into a small startup or smaller business environment. Had a couple of my own patents, so a bit of an entrepreneurial spirit, but wasn't in a position where I really had those choices. Wasn't getting inundated by smaller startups or new ventures. And so I said, you know what, and I love Gillette, they were doing great, and they would buy me and everything that counted. And I said, you know, I've got to get into the New York area, and I made a decision to move into New York with a large company who I communicated with and said, hey, for 3 to 5 years I'm going to beat the bushes and see if I want to stay or go into small business. And so that's kind of when I stepped back, I said, and the rest is history.
So Peter was there because I married Lizzie when I was 28, turned 29 on our wedding night. And so he saw this, which a lot of you have heard before, which is right at 30, I kind of freaked out a little bit and started really putting the pedal to the metal, started Wine Library TV right after it. And as much as I worked and as intensely as I worked in my late 20s, 30 started the process of this insanity that I'm executing against now. So I just want to buy the jets, and I didn't think I was going fast enough. And so I also took a step back and said, where am I going to be in 10 or 20 years? Let me make sure my behavior maps it. So I think as you're entering your 30s, I think it's really smart to think about your 40s and 50s.
So what Gary does on intuition and gut and heart and passion, I kind of did over my career, maybe in a little more of a discipline, a little more balanced left brain, right brain way. And it was a driver of why we decided to write the book, Think to Win, was to try to bring some very simple concepts and how-tos in the world of strategy and execution to folks who are working in small, medium, large companies, public or private, even in the not-for-profit sector, where they can take a step back and say, hey, look, here are a few principles, a few how-tos to get folks aligned, fact-based, not myth-based, and get aligned on key issues, key opportunities, and how do we execute. Yogi Berra, who I was a big fan of, and yes, I do have a signed picture from Don Larson and Yogi Berra.
Because all of you were curious.
Curious of that, who said a good batter will always beat a good pitcher, and vice versa.
And he is the best.
I'm a believer in good strategy always drives good execution, and vice versa.
Yep.
And that's kind of what this book is about, in a more disciplined way, to kind of those how-tos to let some power strategic thinking work for
Tremendous right hook, Peter. Let's go, India.
Ryan asks, how do you deal with drama in the workplace? And how do you avoid having more drama?
PK, drama in the workplace. How much were you as an executive in corporate America into HR-like stuff, or did you kind of let the pros handle that?
I love that area. I was into it.
I believe that, by the way. I know this guy.
I was known as Mr. Anal Retentive. So
me too.
I kind of got my fingers dirty. I knew when to step in.
In the anal retentiveness?
Yeah, but at the end of the day, jargon aside, and I'm a believer, with whom you go is more important than where you go. I got heavily vested on the HR side because it didn't make any difference what kind of idea you might have, startup or big company, big brands, small brands, whatever. Whatever you're working on, combined with no matter how much capital you may have, working capital for startup business or whatever, at the end of the day, if you didn't have the right people and the right team in place,
you're dead.
Game over. And so
I believe in that so much. I don't think there's any Lakers. There's Kobe and Shaq era, and then there's not, and then like Stefan, who's like a Lakers fan, he then becomes a Golden State Warriors fan because he's just bandwagon. But most people, and so I've talked plenty about HR. I want to get this thing moving. I want some speed, India. Let's go to the next one.
James asks, banks are old, stiff, and have largely the same messaging: safety. Is their sheer size saving them from disruption? For now.
Yeah, I'll jump in on this one because I'm spending a lot of time with Silicon Valley that's really I mean, what's going on in Silicon Valley now with startups that are looking to attack banks, and if you look at what's going on in general with like Venmo and so many other things that we're living through, yeah, I mean, I think banks have enormous infrastructure and have a value prop, but there's enormous amounts of disruption. I think the question alludes to a marketing message, and I think it's actually gonna be more of a utility message. When you start layering, you know, it's funny, Bitcoin has been not a top of mind in the startup world recently, but blockchain mentality and just the innovation around financing and the financial sector is gonna be pretty aggressive. I think that, I actually think a lot of banks' messages are not necessarily just about safety. I think it's about creating indulgence and empowering you to do the things that you want to do. I've watched a lot of the banking messaging as we start planning on getting into a couple of clients in that sector. I think what's way more important is that banks' brands in our society are very poor because of what happened with the Wall Street meltdowns and things of that nature. And I think a lot of banks have been very slow to really properly transition to mobile. And so there's a lot of white space and a lot of innovation coming that it's funny, I can see the sharks circling around the banking sector and SF, and it'll be interesting for the next decade. Keep it going.
Alex asks, what do you want to be remembered for the most?
Go ahead, PK.
Helping people be the best they can be. Family and otherwise.
It's awesome. For me, it's there's a lot of different things I think about, but one of the things that I really want, I talk a lot about guilting everybody I ever meet to coming to my funeral. I'm very passionate about bringing more value to people than they brought to me. One of the things I admire so much about my father-in-law, Peter, is it's scary to me how many, we're different, clearly in certain ways, but boy, do we have a lot of similarities. And when I started to get to know him, it was interesting to me how his wife, Anne, who's amazing, would talk about him, and I was like, that's me, that's what I like. I like that everybody comes to me for help, and I help them, and all those things, and so that's what I would say, 51-49, that I gave more to them in our relationship than they gave to me.
That said, if you agree with me, I think I better rethink my position.
Okay.
Groucho Marx, 1938, duck suit. But next question.
Peter, good news. This audience doesn't even know my 1990.
You don't even know who Groucho Marx is?
Do you know who Groucho Marx is? Okay, good. Stefan, tell the truth. No. D-Rock, no. Peter, they didn't even know who Samantha Fox was.
Oh, that's different.
Do you know who Samantha Fox is?
No,
yeah, I know. These are generational things.
You can't compare Samantha Fox and Groucho Marx.
Yes, Groucho Marx is much more classic. I agree with that.
Headline is,
India.
folks, if you don't know who Groucho Marx is, Google him, look him up.
Google him. Let's go.
Last one from Stefan.
Stefan! Oh.
Stefan asks, Gary, you talk about hustle a lot, but what cost did you have to pay to get here now?
Peter, you worked really hard.
That's a great, I would say, at the end of the day, there doesn't have to be a cost. And I really believe that.
Got everyone's attention.
You're talking to a guy who kind of spent a career at maybe averaging number of hours, say almost 6.25 to 6.5 days a week, 12, 14 hours average days over an entire career. Now, having said that,
you're giving a lot of insight to why Lizzie is able to deal with my insanity here.
So beyond multitasking and learning how to do all this stuff, when again, you take a deep breath along the way and you step back on the things that make a difference and the things that count that you want to focus on. And to me, family first. So I always planned. I was traveling a lot. Half my career was in the consulting business. And I traveled a lot, but I always tried to do day trips, get back in time for a late dinner or whatever, be there when the kids took baths. Managed Little League teams from my son's...
How was Alex Klein as a Little League baseball player?
He was all defense. A little offense, but not that.
Yes!
But,
on the record, Alex,
he
eat
held
it.
his own and he was a starter.
Okay.
But you find time. You make time and you try to balance it out. And so I don't know if there were any real trade-offs on a day in and day out basis. Doesn't have to be. If you let what you're focused on solely run your life, there will be usually people, family, relationship trade-offs.
I fully believe in that. I think the practical level is that probably you and I got to spend a little less time. What we gave up was our passion for business or our careers probably came at the expense of some other potential, hobbies and other leisures, that it didn't come at the expense of the family, but you maybe never developed your golf game or your tennis game or fishing or other things that could have been interesting to you in your life.
That's
because, right? I would say that's what I can feel. I mean, I've got the Jets, so I've got something, a thing for me, but I definitely aren't, I would be very interested in all these other little things, but I punt them for the business.
Great point. May or may not be necessarily relevant, I think, because when you step back, and in business, we make the point in the book, which is, by the way, Think to Win, Unleashing
This is the
Power
best.
of Strategic Thinking. I'm in the advertising business.
Link that up, boys. Let's make sure we link that up.
Amazon, 23 testimonials from CEOs and others.
This is awesome.
But that said, life, personal, business, relationships, is about making choices.
100%.
And so there's always choices to be made. And if you get your top 2 or 3 priorities right, the order of magnitude of the next level of those kind of choices maybe are not as relevant.
That's right.
If you try to be too much, too many, then you run into a storm.
Let me close this with something that I think will connect with the audience because it's a truth and it's something I admire tremendously. I know this dude very well. This man's retired. From the day you retired, I have I visit him in Florida and different things of that nature. His retirement hustle is substantially stronger than a lot of people that I know's work ethic in their normal environment. I look at you and I get pumped because I'm like, cool, if Peter can retire like that, which means, I don't know, working all the time, maybe I can retire like that. So I appreciate the air cover.
I just wouldn't count on it.
Meaning you think I'll lose my passion?
I don't think you've developed the kind of relationships and networking I have.
Please. Is that you really believe it? All right. I'm gonna ask you to ask a question of the day. If you want to ask this audience, entrepreneurs, young millennials, all ages and shapes and sizes, but obviously skewing a little bit younger than you, what kind of question would you like to ask them to answer in the comments? Because I know you love reading it. Peter reads all your comments. He always wants to jump in. He razzes me. He's like, Sally said you stink. So he's paying attention, boys and girls.
One thing I learned over my entire career in academia as well as in business, especially relative to startup businesses, 1 to 3 year old businesses, working on big brands at big companies, etc., was at the end of the day, it came down to 2 or 3 words that I would always ask when anyone brought in an idea for a new ad campaign, a new product, a new consumer promotion idea, a new opportunity within a company, small, medium, or large. It came down to 2 or 3 words. And if they could answer the question to these 2 or 3 words that went together, by the way, and I'll tell you right now, the middle word was and, so you only need 2 more. What would be your 2 words that you think every successful business needs to be able to address?
Blank and blank. I like it.
Yeah.
We'll see what you have to say.
The answer is not blank.
Got it. Peter, I love you.
Cheers.
Give me a kiss.
Good.
You keep asking questions. We'll keep answering them.